Good morning, everybody. Hello, Stampers. It's good to be here. This is a Facebook Live featuring the Countryside Corners bundle. And so I'm going to share with you cards that we made last week, cards that we're making this week, and cards we're going to make next week. So these were the two cards that we made last week, and they're just fantastic. And if you want to check out that video, go ahead and just look back in either my timeline on Facebook, or you can find a picture of these two cards on the thumbnail in YouTube. And then this week, we are going to make these two cards. And I really, really love this bundle, as you can tell. And I could probably do this for another 6 weeks. But next week we are going to make cards with the Let's Go Fishing product suite. And so this is what we're going to make next week, right here on Facebook Live, or you can find me on the premiere the following day on YouTube. And so I'm excited to share these fantastic cards with you next week. But getting back to this week, here are the cards we're making. And let's go ahead and get started. So again, I want to thank you for joining me today. It's super great to be back making videos for you. And I really, really, really enjoyed all of the encouragement that you've given me, both demonstrators and customers of mine who have reached out to let me know how happy you are that I am back. So welcome. We've got a lot of people joining us, and I always appreciate shares, so thank you so much for that. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Yeah, you can see I have a little boo-boo on my finger. You don't hang out here at the farm too long without getting some kind of boo-boo. So we are going to start with this card right here, and it's like an I'm so sorry card. So let me show you what the inside panel looks like. The outside panel says, I'm so sorry you're going through this, hoping for better days ahead. So let's go ahead and get started with this. The ink that we're going to use on this particular card is Night of Navy. And on the inside panel, we will be using some boho blue as well as some balmy blue, because we have a couple of different colors on that very soft flower on the inside. And you're wondering, because the Countryside Corners does not come with sentiments, does not come with anything except these really awesome cutouts that you can use with the fantastic dies, also called Countryside Corners dies. But I want to share with you that there is a stamp set that has some coordinating stamps, and it looks like this. It's called Lasting Joy. And as soon as I saw it, I knew it was a coordinating stamp set with the Countryside Corners. And so you can tell by this little flower that we're going to be using, and then all of these fantastic sentiments that sort of have I don't know, it's sort of like a fine line, adding a little bit of light but serious tone to your cards, which is good when you're doing thinking of you cards or sorry cards. So anyway, we'll go ahead and get started with this. So here is the card. Here is the first set of products we're going to be using. This is the Night of Navy card base, 4 1/4 by 11, scored at 5.5. And we'll be using some, well, actually, I think I pre-stamped this. I have. So as I mentioned, there is a little cutout right here. And as I shared last week, you can take some Post-it notes, or in my case, I like to use removable tape. And you can line this up with, I have to share this because it's so good. You can stamp the whole entire image, because it does come all together as one image in your Countryside Corners. It's like a big, big background stamp. But then you can cut out individual pieces to use for your words or for borders around your words. And you can even tape these together so that you can get the exact look that you're looking for. So we are actually going to be using this little dotted panel, And I went ahead, run that through the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine, and I already, just like that, have the little panel pre-cut for you. And so that's what that looks like. Let me get this out of the way. I did feel like I had to show that. So I know it's a repeat for those of you that joined me last week, but you never know. There might be somebody new watching who doesn't fully understand how these dies work, and so I have to consider that as well. All right, so that is one panel that we're going to be using. And then also, I took the very smallest die in that set of Countryside Corners and I cut it out a little panel of Boho Blue, and I did pre-stamp I'm So Sorry on there. Now, the pre-stamping on a cutout is super easy because the Lasting Joy is a photopolymer stamp set, so it's really easy to see through where you're stamping, no problems. All right, so how to do this? What we want to do is we want to insert this in here because we're going to make this a full panel. So I just set it in like this, and then I'm going to flip it over and just make sure it's all set up in there great. And then I find it's just easiest to take a little bit of Scotch tape to the back, and we're going to tape down both the front and the bottom. And then that secures it so it stays together for us while we use it on our card. And then I went ahead and I also pre-cut a panel 4 by 5 1/4 of Boho Blue, and I did run it through the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine with another item that is in this product suite, and this one is called the Countryside Blossoms embossing folder. So you can see how beautiful that is. Just a lovely addition to this product suite. And of course it does coordinate with some of the Designer Series paper that's in the suite. So now this has not got any ribbon overlap or anything like that. So we can go ahead and we can just glue this directly onto our card panel. And you can use Stampin' Seal as well. But sometimes I find glue is a little bit faster. How about you guys? Do you prefer the glue or the Stampin' Seal? It's always kind of interesting to see what people prefer. And people will swear by their adhesive like it's all that they use. I'm a little choosy. Sometimes I like glue and sometimes I like the Stampin' Seal depending on what I'm doing. So here we are with this much done. Then I want to share with you the next panel of paper that I cut are the little rabbits. And I used the very biggest die on the Countryside Corners dies. And so I just pre-cut that so we can go ahead and we can put that directly onto our card as well. And that's just going to be perfectly centered into our card. So I'm going to again use a little multi-purpose liquid glue all the way around. And we're going to set this right into our card. And then we're just going to wiggle it into place, just making sure that our right and left sides are even as well as the top and the bottom. So once that's in place, we're good to go. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to attach this panel, but there is a little bit of ribbon that we want to put in this panel before we get too far. And the ribbon that we're going to use is called Gold and Very Vanilla Satin Edge Ribbon. And this is what it looks like. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it in half, and I don't care so much about the length at the moment. So I am going to take my scissors, give this a little cut, and I don't even care about what the cut looks like, because what we're aiming to do at this point is just attach this to the back, and then we can trim up the ends once it has been attached to our card. So when I get it about where I think it's going to look good, and I have these little tails looking just like I want them to look, I just go ahead and I'm going to kind of kitty corner put on this tape to grab as much of the ribbon as possible. And then I'm going to flip it over, and now I can go ahead and I can just trim my ribbon edges to look really nice and to make them look a little more uniform. So now we have these cute little ribbon ends. And now we're going to put this onto our card with a little bit of, well, actually with dimensionals. No glue required here. So now we're just going to take dimensionals, And I've got to grab a new set here. You can hear my drawer in the background. And we're just gonna pop on about 5 of them. So on each end and then one in the middle should work well. Then we'll take off the peelies. I've got my little fossil bowl here ready to go. And then this is going right onto our card. So this will go just like so. Just set it down here so that the left side and the bottom side is about even. And that looks great to me. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to embellish the front of our card with some neutral adhesive sequins. I love it when Stampin' Up! Puts the adhesives directly onto the sequins. Oh, it just makes your life so much easier. And so I've got my sequins right here. And you can use the small side, or you can use the smaller size down here or the bigger size. I think on this card I use the smaller size, so on this card I'll use the bigger size. And I am going to pop those into the 3 corners. Because these are gold sequins, I mean, they're a little bit bronzy, but whoops, for the most part, they're gold. Hold on. I got it on and then I decided it wasn't quite right. You know how that goes. And then, but I think they look good with the ribbon. So that's kind of the point of using this color of sequins. So as you can see, I just dropped those into the corners of this card. And this is a very easy and mailable card. So no excuse to not send this card. All right, so now we're going to do the inside panel. And that is going to be a little more, not complicated, but I'll just give you some tips for what you can do. So the first thing we're going to need is our 4 by 5 1/4 inch panel of basic white. And then I think I will not glue this in until I know for sure that my stamping looks right. I do sometimes glue it in before I know my stamping looks right. But, oh, we've got lots of people saying they love the glue all the way. Fantastic. All right, so this is 3/4 inch by 4. And you know what? I almost missed this when I was putting this card together the first time. But notice the pattern on this paper. It's actually tiny, tiny little flowers. Yes, oh my goodness. So we want to make sure that when we do glue this down that we have our flowers going in the right direction. So I'm just going to loosely put this here. I'm not actually gluing it down yet. And the thing that I want to do next is I'm going to do my stamping. And I do want a piece of scrap paper. So I have to pull one out. I didn't have one ready. So I don't need this except for some stamping off. So I'm gonna fold this to keep it kind of out of the way. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the stamps from Lasting Joy. That's the one I wanna use. And one thing that I did to make my life easier on this is I put both of the sentiments that I'm using right on the block so that with one swish of the stamp, I get everything done. So, what should I stamp first, the sentiment or the flower? I think I'm going to stamp the flower first because then I'll know where to put the sentiment. So once again, we're using Lasting Joy for our inside panel. And I've got my flowers set up, and we will do some 2nd generation stamping. So the Boho Blue, it's one of our new in colors. And right now, for a limited time until we run out of supplies, you can actually get the mini Stamp and Cut and Emboss machine in the Boho Blue color. So you should definitely check that out in the Stampin' Up! Store. And we're just gonna set this in here. Give that a press. So we have a very light and pretty boho blue shadow there. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing with my balmy blue. Yep, I'm even gonna stamp off the balmy blue. So we're gonna ink up this little oval shaped flower, stamp it off, and then we're gonna put that right in the center. And I know it's barely like noticeable that there's two different colors there, but you know what? I notice it. And that's what counts. Sometimes when the person who's making the card, when it makes a difference to you, it makes a difference. All right, so now we're going to ink up the words. Boy, my ink pads are so juicy. I have to be careful so I don't over ink, because that's almost as bad as under inking. All right, so then we're gonna set this in just like so. And my stamping turned out great. So now I can safely put on my side panel. I was being a little careful because I did not make extra cuts for this particular card, so it has to all work well. In the following card, I did make an extra little piece, which I'll show you when we get there, just in case I goof up the stamping. All right, so here we go. We're gonna set this in, take that right to the edge. And sometimes it helps to see if you've got it right on the edge by putting it on a darker piece of paper, because you don't want white showing through. In the next card, we will have white showing through, but I didn't want it for this card. So this is where I use my Stampin' Seal. Whoops, I see that I did not get this pulled up high enough. There we go. Now we have no white showing because I had a teeny little bit up here. All right, now I'm going to use my Stampin' Seal because you can actually get glue lines on Basic White and Very Vanilla if you're not super careful. If you're a super careful kind of person and barely use any glue, then go ahead, go wild with the glue. But if you're not super careful and you use too much glue, it won't show up right away, but a couple of months later, you can see the glue lines. Ask me how I know, because I've gotten so many swaps through the years from other demonstrators, and they're heavy-handed on the glue. And then I can see exactly where they whip the glue around on the card, which is why I don't do that. So if you want to take your stamping to the next level, always put your Basic White and your Very Vanilla on with Stampin' Seal. All right, so there we go. We have this card is done. And I think the only thing I have to have out for the next card is the Night of Navy. So I might as well leave that out. So I'm going to set this aside right now. And let me go ahead and get some supplies for our next card that we're making. The next card that we're making is going to look like this, if all goes as planned. If all goes as planned, you'll see what I mean. All right, so we are going to use the same type of background. We've got 4 1/4 by 11 inches scored at 5 1/2. So that's our card base. Again, it's going to be in Night of Navy, just like our first card. And then I did go ahead and I, again, used the Countryside Blossoms embossing folder on a piece of crumb cake that's 4 by 5 1/4. And just like on the first card, we don't have to worry about ribbon wraps, but I do want to do an even trim with my edge, because on this particular card, as you can see, there's a little bit of, I don't know, crumb cake that's showing through on this left side because I didn't do the trim. So I decided when I do this live, I would do the little trim edge. So this is a 1 1/4 inch strip of another piece of the Countryside Inn Designer Series paper. It's the one with the little birdies on the back. Remember that card we made last week? So here it is again. So what we want to do is we want to put this strip onto our crumb cake embossed panel. And I think I will go like this. And I'm just holding it up to the crumb cake panel so that I know about how much glue to put on. Then I can set this on the left side, and we want about a 1/2 inch from the bottom. Whoops. I think I'm gonna take this over just a little bit because I can tell with my cutter I didn't do a very good cut. All right, so now we're gonna press this in and then flip it over, and using a scissors, just go ahead and trim this even with your edges. There we go. Now we can go ahead and freely put this onto our card front. So I will do that with our multi-purpose liquid glue. And then we're gonna set this in just like so. For our inside panel, I'm going to do this next because it's so easy. We have a 4 by 5 1/4 inch panel of basic white. And then I put a 3/4 inch by 4 inch strip on the left-hand side. And I did leave a little bit of white showing on this card. And again, I'm using this strip of little flowers, and I'm making sure that I glue it on so that the flowers are in the right direction. And then this is going to go right here. So I'm going to flip that over once again using Stampin' Seal. And then we can set this in. Okay, inside panel is done. Now we're going to continue to work on the outside panel. And so you will want a scrap of the Countryside Inn Designer Series paper that looks on the order of this. And I did pre-cut this. I'm going to share with you which die that I use. So if you're counting from the center, I believe it's the 4th one. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You will take, I can't grab it with my Band-Aid. It's the 4th die from the center, and that is the one I used to put this on. And what we're going to do is we're going to set this in, and one easy way to figure out how to set it in so it looks nice is to just make sure that this edge and this edge are lined up with the top of your paper strip. And that way you can see that nice angle. You can see the entirely nice angle on both sides on your strip of the darker Night of Navy paper. So this is going to just be put right on, and we're just going to glue that. I like sharing easy cards because that's the kind of cards I like to make. Easy. All right, here we go. Plus, I think it helps new stampers who maybe aren't quite as experienced to be able to put together something nice and easy, something that doesn't take all day to do. All right, so here we go. We're at this point so far. And now what we're going to do is we're going to prepare our sentiment. Now, I could have used the Lasting Joy sentiments because they do have a thinking of you in here. However, it just didn't seem big enough for me. So I decided I would grab a different sentiment set, one that is called Wonderful Thoughts. And I felt like the thinking of you in the Wonderful Thoughts would fill in my die cut a little bit better. So that's what I'm using. And oh, I already have it on a block. Hooray. So it's right here. So if this goes wrong, I do have an alternative panel, I thought. Where is it? Oh, I do. So let me grab. So I have an alternative panel in Crumb Cake in case this gets goofed up. I know. So I'd have to use so if I did this, I would have to use a different ribbon. So if I end up resorting to this, I would use what we used last week, the bordering blue, or no, it's the Night of Navy bordered ribbon. See, I'll show you how good that looks. So I could do it this way as well. So you have lots of options. So look how good that looks. Can you see that? I'd hold it up, except it will all fall apart. So I will just leave it there. But you can see how good that looks. That's my alternative in case my boho blue panel does not turn out. Sometimes, you know, you got to have backups and alternatives just in case. All right, so I'm going to ink up Thinking of You. And then this is the smallest die in that Countryside Corners die set. And I am going to, I should be able to stamp this well because like I can see right through to where I'm stamping. So it should be a good stamp. And it looks great. There we go. So I will not need my alternative stamped sentiment. And the only reason it was an alternative in that color is because I was too lazy to cut a second panel of this when I had this in my little scrap pile. All right, so the next thing we're going to do, yes, is we're going to make that cute little ribbon wrap, and we're using a combo set. So this is the Real Red and Burlap combo ribbon. I haven't opened the Real Red part yet, but I have used the burlap. So we are going to do a very similar thing. Get this little cut off here. We're going to do a very similar thing that we did in our last card. We are just going to cut extra and get the top where we want it. And we want kind of the right angle. So we want it kind of off to the side like this. And then we're just going to tape that down and call that pretty good. That looks good to me. Maybe a little tighter. Nice angle. Flip it over before it, whoops, that didn't work. Flip it over, and before it gets away on you, get it taped down. And now we can fuss with the bottom once we get it on our card. So here's our card. We're going to put that on with Stampin' Dimensionals. Again, another super easy card to mail. I'm all about good mailing. Because now that I'm out here in the country, my post office seems to be a little bit more picky about how things are mailed. And it's probably because I was maybe doing this wrong in the past. Maybe mailing things a little too bulky, but you know, when I was living in the Twin Cities, like, hello, they don't have time to figure out who's doing things right and who's doing things wrong, and they just let a lot slip through. Not so much here in the country. They've got a little more time, so they do it right. So now that I have this on my card, and I pretty much kept the bottom of this sentiment even with where I would imagine the strip of paper is going. Now I'm going to cut this. And that looks good to me. Now, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add some solid faceted dots to our card to make this just look spectacular. All right, so we are going to grab, and I actually had to grab a new pack because all I had left was the Lemon Lolly. So these are called, well, I guess they're not faceted dots. They are adhesive backed solid gems. But I believe maybe it's not boho blue. I'm not sure what these colors are. It does not say on the packaging, but I'm sure it says in the catalog. But in my opinion, this sort of looks like it could be copper clay or pecan pie, boho blue, balmy blue. This is definitely lemon lolly. But these are really pretty. They've got a nice, they say they're just solid gems, but they have a little bit of faceting on them to catch the light. It's really pretty. All right, so I'm going to take my Stampin', my Take Your Pick tool. And then I'm going to take one large, and we're gonna set this right here. One medium, and that can go up here. And then one little tiny, and that can go over here. So let me show you how I place those. Oh, it's so pretty, isn't it?